Hi everyone. So without a doubt, this decade has been when I was forced to confront death. I'm heading towards 50, so it's not the first time family members or people I know have died. But this was the first time I've truly had to face it. It never really occurred to me until the second half of this decade that I used to deal with death by ignoring it. It's not that I completely ignored it, but I was certainly capable of parcelling it up and putting it into its own special compartment, so it didn't really impact my day-to-day life. I was able to maintain some distance from it, I guess. It's probably one of the reasons the divorce felt like the first time I was grieving for someone. If we jump back way outside the decade, you can take the death of my father. I didn't fully process what was going on, and then I did the whole parcelling up thing. Despite him being diagnosed with leukemia, it never actually occurred to me that he could die. I literally just got on with my life. I went to work as normal, nothing changed. Terrible though it sounds, it was just a case that someone was ill. Not that he might actually die. It wasn't actually the leukemia that killed him in the end, but his heart not being able to cope with the chemotherapy. But that's sort of beside the point. I'm not exactly crushed by remorse or filled with regret that I didn't handle the short period of time my father was diagnosed with leukemia better, but I do acknowledge a small wish I'd done it slightly differently. My father, he had cancer. There should have been a different way of approaching it other than just carrying on as normal. I mean, my middle brother handled it differently. It impacted him more. He took actions and did things with our father on the foundation that he might not be around in the not too distant future. And as I said, that never occurred to me that he might not be around. Just full on did not process it. I suspect some of this is due to a couple of variables, largely time and inevitability. The deaths that have affected me the most have been well and truly communicated as being inevitable and taking place over an extended period of time. The first time this happened was my wife's grandmother. She got some form of cancer, I can't really remember which one now, and rapidly ended up bedridden, facing the inevitable. It was absolutely awful. And this was my first time seeing this play out. She lost all sense of independent life, to the extent she had to have people clean up her own bathroom disasters. And this was literally the first time I cried in these sort of situations. We'd come down to visit and she was making the best of it. You know, as I suppose you do in these situations, though I hope I personally never have to face it. Then everyone was just going to go home. To leave her alone, trapped in that bed during the night. I mean, I got it. I got that people have to get on with their lives. I mean, how do you deal with this sort of thing? It's so upending. And I have effectively just described to you how I just got on with mine when my father had cancer. So I can't exactly hold judgment on people, but I just couldn't take it. And I just sat on the stairs of her house in total disbelief. People were going to leave her alone all night. This person making the best of it, even though she'd know she was confined in that bed till she died. And I just broke down. And when my middle brother was diagnosed with cancer out of nowhere, I mean literally out of nowhere, he went for something else. It hit hard. And yes, that's correct. 3 relatives have been killed by cancer, 2 of them relatives at a very young age. I mean, my middle brother was obviously younger than me. It was the usual affair. The first doctor gives a rather grave prognosis which sets the tone being you're unlikely to see your kids grow up. Then you get the whole, well, let's go to the specialist. And those specialists always like to scale back the concern until they get the more detailed results. But experience with my middle brother and my father always tells me that is false hope. Invariably in these situations, that initial doctor's diagnosis is pretty much on point. So I believed the first diagnosis and that all we were doing was waiting for confirmation. and all I could see ahead was someone else I cared for wasting away with cancer in some bed somewhere. Needless to say, we got the confirmation and it was a brutal 6 months. These things build up in your life to change your perceptions on things, including life itself. There are things in fiction which didn't used to impact me emotionally, whether it be in books, films or TV shows, but they do now. This is because you didn't have the life experience to fully understand them before. But now with, shall we say, extra life under your belt, they hit their target with amazing accuracy. Inevitably, as the generation above you gets thinner, you start to reflect on your own mortality. It becomes slightly disconcerting to realise that you're within a hair's whisker of being the oldest generation in the family. Throw in the fact that 2 of the closest relatives have died in their 40s and 50s, and approaching the big 5-0 really makes you think. You start to think it's entirely possible that while you may be one of those 17-year-olds hiking enthusiastically around the Swiss Alps, in a way that seems actually fitter than you, even though you're 20 years younger, you never know. While I'll never be someone who goes on a crazy financial bender assuming I'm going to die young, this decade has altered how I think about these things. It's entirely possible I might not see 60. I know that sounds terribly morbid. It's not something I think about daily. I assume I am going to live a long life. But the idea that I might not is something that has entered my consciousness. Because it's possible, right? I have the life experience to back it up. Mortality, time, repercussions. They inevitably have you considering different choices. Until the next chapter, you can support me by doing a few simple things. Like the video, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Certainly post a comment, and let's continue to make small great changes to make life a story worth telling.